welcome back to the Gem Cutter's Craft. Today I'm giving you a personal tour of my faceting workbench, specifically my custom setup built around a traditional jambpeg faceting machine. This video idea came from Currently Rockhounding. Thank you for the suggestion. I hadn't thought to show this in such detail before, but it makes perfect sense. The bench is where everything happens. The foundation of my entire workstation is, of course, the bench itself, and this one is something special. It's an antique jambpeg faceting bench from the Jura Mountains in France. I found it last year listed online by a retired antiques dealer. As soon as I saw it, I knew it had to be part of my workshop. So we rented a car and drove up into the mountains to get it. When we picked it up, though, it looked nothing like it does now. It was rough, heavily worn, and painted in uneven layers. The wood was dull, the hardware corroded, and the whole thing felt like it had been forgotten for decades. Once I got it home, I spent days carefully restoring every part. I stripped the paint, cleaned the metal, reconditioned the wood, and reassembled the whole thing. And if you want to know more about that story, I've got an entire video showing the restoration process. Today, it's back in working condition. It's clean, functional, and absolutely beautiful. A piece of history brought back to life and in working condition. At the heart of the workstation is my faceting machine, a Fra-lap, mounted directly into the antique bench. This is a machine that I've been working with for over a year now, and I love the way it works and how small and travel-friendly it is, but when I'm at home, I want it to be incorporated seamlessly into this antique bench. Originally, the machine came with a raw aluminum finish, which felt a little too modern and also a little too industrial. I wanted something that would complement the warm tones of the antique wood and also give the raw metal some protection. So I disassembled the entire unit, and I chose to have it painted in a soft, warm brown color that perfectly blends in with the wood of the bench. I had to cut a hole into the desktop so that the base could fit flush into it. Aside from just adding the bench in and painting it, I also added a few modifications, including this bright red button. I call it the squeak button. I use it during the polishing process in order to squeak the facets, where I stop the lap in the middle of the polishing process, which allows the surface of the gemstone to flow in order to fuse flaws. More about that in upcoming videos. I made some other subtle changes to make the station more functional. Behind the lamppost, I drilled a small hole so I could slide the base of the light stand directly into the bench for a seamless look. A couple of zip ties keep it perfectly secure. This metal rod sticking out is actually part of the original system. It was part of the arm that held the hand crank lap. It's no longer in use, but I couldn't get it out, so I cleaned it up and left it in to give the bench a little bit of a historical touch. Since it was originally a hand crank system, there's a hole where the crank once sat, which I covered with a thin copper plate and weathered it to blend it in. I like this as a little detail. Below the bench, things are simple but functional, just the essentials that support the work above. You can see the bottom of the Fra-lap where it's coming through the bottom of the bench and some of my wiring. I wanted the system to be modular so I can take it apart when traveling. The squeak button has a release for the wires here, so if I want to travel, all I need to do is disconnect 2 wires, pull the base out of the table, and I'm ready to go. Now let's take a closer look at the most important part of the whole setup, the jambpeg system, also known in French as the invention. This mechanism is what gives me control over both the angle and the index for each facet. It's beautifully simple, entirely mechanical, and remarkably precise once you learn how to use it. The system works like this. The gemstone is mounted on a dop stick, which slides into the mechanical case. The mechanical stick is then placed into one of these numbered holes, which determine the cutting angle. Lower holes produce a steeper angle, higher holes create shallower ones. The geometry is consistent, but everything is analog. Each hole's exact angle depends on factors like stick length and the size of the stone itself. To determine the angle more precisely, I sometimes use this digital angle gauge. I rest it on the dop stick while it's inserted into a particular hole, and it tells me the exact angle that I'm set at. Normally, I don't care too much about the angle. I only need to know it for a few facets, like what my cullet angle is or what angle my crown mains are being cut at. But sometimes if I need to follow a diagram precisely or do something that's historically accurate, or I just want to check where my critical angle is for a stone, then I can do it with this. and see that for this stone, hole 15 is 46.5 degrees. Now the reason why there's no fixed angles on here is because the size of the stone will change the angle of the stick. So imagine if I was doing a much bigger stone, it would push the stick up this way. And if I was doing a smaller stone, it'd push it down. If we stick this on here, we can see that for a medium-sized stone, this hole is 45.9. But if I go up a little bit, maybe it's 48.8. Or if I go down a little bit, maybe it's 45 or 46. So the size of the stone will change the angle of what these holes are. So they're all relative. Also, if you have the jambpeg up or down on the pole, that changes the hole position as well, because of course this is going to move your stick. So I usually only check this once or twice per stone, mostly just to check my critical angle. That's the thing that I really want to know that I don't want to get wrong. The indexing is handled by the mechanical case. It has an 8-sided housing and a notched indexing plate that allows me to rotate the stone in controlled increments. In this case, I can rotate 8 clicks to the left or right of each face, giving me 64 index positions, the same as a standard 64 index American faceting machine. If I want to move to the next flat face, I rotate to the next side of the octagon. It's all done by feel, and after a while, your hands memorize the rhythms of the clicks. Some of my cases even allow half-step clicks, which means I can get 128 index positions around the entire stick. Perfect for complicated patterns or for placing a facet between 2 standard positions. Sometimes that's really necessary when you're working on unusually shaped designs like fancy ovals, eggs, or other weird shapes. This platform here allows me to cut my girdles. I can set the indexing plate directly on it and then raise it up or down depending on the height of the lap I'm using. The idea is that I want this plate to be high enough so when the stone is touching the lap, the stick is at exactly 90 degrees. That way I can cut my girdles in flat on each side of the stone. Typically I only use this setup for emerald cuts or rectangular shapes. It's ideal when I need that sharp, precise girdle line all the way around, but for all the other shapes, like the egg I'm currently working on, it's all done entirely freehand. Freehand means that you've got the stick on the lap and you just simply turn your hand as the lap spins, and the whole shape is done freehand without using any of the indexing sides or anything else. You just carve the shape in as you want it. You can see I've got another egg started here, and that one's also been done entirely freehand. Now let's talk about cutting the tables. I use a small table cutting device that sits right over the lap over here. It's a simple device, but it lets me control the position of the stone with incredible accuracy. I can adjust it in all the directions, left, right, backwards, and forwards. So if I see that my table's not cutting in flat, I can just make a small adjustment as I'm lowering it onto the lap. When I'm ready to cut the table, I place the table cutter over the lap and gently lower it down until it's hitting. The indexing plate rests against this metal block, which locks it in place and keeps everything stable, and also lets me make sure that I'm always cutting the table from the same direction. You might have noticed that there's a coin taped to the side of this indexing block. It's not just for looks, it's actually a spacer. The new mechanical stick that I have has a slightly smaller indexing plate than the original one that came with the machine. The difference is small, but it's enough that my index gear won't touch the indexing block. After a little trial and error, I realized that a US dime was the perfect thickness, so I flattened it slightly on the lap and taped it on. Problem solved. At the back of the bench, I keep a variety of sticks and mechanical cases, each one designed for a slightly different type of faceting. They may look similar, but each has its own geometry, its own function, and its own story. This one here is the original stick from the Fra lap. It's 8-sided with a ±8 indexing system, 8 to the left, 8 to the right for 64 indices. This other one is a 4-sided case, perfect for doing squares and rectangles, and it also has the ability to do the clicks, so I can just click through the indexes by ear without actually having to lift it up and push it up and down. This one is a 6-sided stick, so this one's good for doing triangles, hexagons, or anything that's built around 6-fold symmetry. One of the newest additions to my collection is this 96 index stick. It has a completely different look from the others because it's designed for an Israeli or Indian style jambpeg machine. This one's different because the stick and the case are all one piece. You can't take the stick out of this one. Size-wise, it's compatible with the Fra lap, so I'm looking forward to trying it out so that I can do some more complicated American style designs without having to mess with any of the indexing geometries. With this stick, no conversions necessary. I've also got a mix of brass and aluminum sticks over here. These are spare sticks, ready to be swapped out when I'm working on multiple stones. I store them in this vintage match striker jar from the 1920s or 30s. It looks cool, but it's also historically accurate. I've got some old photos of cutters from the 1920s and 30s, and in the photos you can see these exact kind of match strikers on the cutters' desks. To go along with the match striker, I've got this vintage oil lamp, which is another thing that you often see in the old photos of cutters using benches like this. Mostly I just have it here for looks. I love the way that it looks, but if I really wanted to, I could fill it up with oil and actually cut with the illumination of this oil lamp. For now though, I've just got this little LED candle in here which gives a nice soft glow once the lights go out. If we move over to the corner, I've got a case full of tools and accessories. I keep several tweezers on hand, each suited for different tasks: lifting stones from alcohol, positioning gems for photos, or just general handling. This is a razor blade for scoring the laps or scraping off excess wax. I've got to set up calipers for precise measurements so I can make sure I'm cutting to the size I need. And of course, the digital angle gauge. I've also got a little jar for holding alcohol. This is for cleaning stones. I can either pump a little bit of alcohol right onto a stone in a paper towel, or I can use it to refill my little alcohol container down here. This is a refillable travel-size pump with sewing machine oil inside. Perfect for recharging my diamond slurry containers, and it's also completely safe to take onto the plane. I've got a felt tip marker that comes in handy for labeling gem bags or even making little lines on my stones sometimes. Also in this compartment I've got extra jars of diamond powder. I've got 04 and 01, so the 04 is for the outside pre-polishing ring, and the 01 is my fine final polishing for the inside ring of my laps. I mix those with the sewing machine oil to make my own slurries in their own little jars. Towards the back I've got some less frequently used but still essential tools. This is my Noble light that I got from Gil Yuta. He kindly engraved Magus gems into it. It's my favorite light for looking at stones. It's bright, compact, and perfect for peering into the rough to look for inclusions and just to help you understand what's inside of the rough that you're about to cut. Also in this compartment I've got a carbide stick for resurfacing my centered laps. Every time the laps are starting to get worn out, I just run this over it a little bit and they're good as new. In the back here I've got an old toothbrush for cleaning off mechanical parts. I wouldn't put this in my mouth anymore, but it's still really handy because a lot of times when you're cutting and polishing, your tools will get dirty with oil or with diamond powder or slurry from the stones, and it's good to be able to clean them off regularly. Also back here is my cam preformer. This attaches underneath the pole where the jambpeg sits, and you can see how it spins around. So if I take a stick and I put it into the preformer and I tighten it in the back, now the whole thing can spin around, and this white plastic piece, which is the cam, rests against the girdle plate. So if you can imagine, if I had this part on the pole, it would sit on here, and I could just spin around the cam wheel, and it would make whatever shape of the cam that I have. This one's round, so I can make perfect round shapes, but back here I've got a little vintage wooden box full of other shapes. Got marquee shapes, pear shapes, triangle shapes, square cushions, and so many more. I don't use this very much because typically I find that it wastes a lot of weight on my stones and it's just a little bulky to use. I'd rather just hand shape my stones around the rough, but if I want it, it's there, and also if I want to make a perfectly round shape, this is a really easy way to do it. So it's pretty cool. When it comes to laps, I like to keep things simple and efficient. My setup includes just a few key laps, but with these I can cut and polish nearly any gem that I want to. For cutting, I use 2 centered metal laps, one coarse and one fine. The 100 grit lap handles the rough shaping. This is preforming, so taking off the material quickly by hand and giving me my basic outline. Then I switch to the 600 grit lap for fine cutting. This is the lap that I use to cut in all my facets and get everything ready to go before it's time to go on to polishing. For polishing, I typically just have one lap. I really like using tin lead, but right now I've got 2 different tin lead laps on the desk. This one's a brand new one. It's a 60-40 tin lead lap, and then I've got this other one here that's 50-50, so half tin, half lead. Both work really well, and my plan is to use one of them for traveling and one to stay at home. I'm still just deciding which one's going to be which. The final lap that I have here is my wood lap, which I find to be essential for doing the girdles, and sometimes I use them to do tallow top tables. So if I want to have a convex curved table, I can form them freehand with this wood lap. I have the wood lap set up the same that I have my other polishing laps with 2 rings. The outside ring is the 0-4 and the inside ring is the 0-1. So pre-polish and polish are happening on the same lap back to back. It's a really fast system that gives me really good results without having to change laps too many times per stone. For polishing, I make my own diamond slurry. It's a mix between the sewing machine oil and the 2 different diamond powders. I like using the sewing machine oil because it doesn't have a smell, it doesn't get rancid, and it works really well. I store the slurries in these small jars up here. You can see that they're labeled 0-4 or 8,000 grit, and 0-1 or 60,000 grit. So when I'm ready to polish, I just open one of these up and I apply the slurry right onto the lap. So this setup gives me 2 different polishing zones on a single lap, and by separating the grits and keeping them in their own jars, I can avoid cross-contamination. I don't need to stop and switch out the laps constantly, which keeps the process smooth and efficient. One of the things I really like about the tin lead laps is it also allows me to polish quartz with diamond powder, which normally doesn't work. Just below the lap area, I've got a dedicated dopping station. This is where I prepare the stone before it ever touches the lap. All my dopping tools and supplies sit on this bamboo cutting board, which helps me avoid getting any wax or alcohol onto the rest of the bench. I use this traditional red wax for dopping. It's my favorite kind. It's a medium temperature wax that isn't too sticky and isn't too brittle. This is my alcohol lamp. It's filled with the 90% alcohol that I keep under the table. This is also the same solution that I use to clean the stones, so I only have to have one solvent for all my gem cutting work. With the flick of a lighter, the lamp is ready and I can just melt a small ball of wax directly onto the dop stick. I use a special pair of wide tweezers that I use only for wax dopping. The wide back makes it easy to roll the melted wax smooth and evenly around the dop. Finally, I've got this little piece of Palo Santo, so if I'm getting too hot and sweaty while I'm cutting my stone, I just light this and freshen the air and give this space a calm, focused atmosphere again. At the front of the bench is where I keep my notebook. This is where I put my diagrams and sketches and take all my notes for the projects I'm working on. When I'm working on a complex stone like this egg-shaped topaz that I'm cutting right now, I want to sketch out the drawing and then write down the numbers, the angles, the index positions, so that I can come back and find them again in polishing. Typically, I'm working on stones at night and I do them over the course of 2 different days, so the notes help me remember exactly what I was doing yesterday so I can go back and polish all the facets that I already cut. This is also usually where my loop's sitting. My favorite loop is the Belomo 10X triplet. I really like this loop because it fits perfectly on my finger and I can wear it like a ring so that it's always ready to look at the stone. Back here we have a few extra items. This is an antique loop. This loop matches the period that this bench is from, somewhere around the 1920s or 30s. And actually, it still works really well. I like to keep it back here so it stays clean, but I do use it from time to time when my eyes are starting to get fatigued from the 10X. This one's a little bit less powerful and it's just easier to look at and look through. Finally, I've got my measuring loop here. So this is another type of loop that's used for measuring the length of a facet. There's a measuring gauge on the inside, so when you look through the loop and you put your stone right up to it, you can actually measure things with it in millimeters. And for me, this is perfect for doing something like an emerald cut, where you want to make sure that all 4 corners are the exact same length. The other random tool that's sitting on my desk is this very old looking blade. This is about 100 years old, and this is a blade meant for scoring or hashing the polishing laps. So the way that I normally do my lap scoring is with the razor blade, but the traditional French technique of doing it means that you're going to push this blade against the lap while it's turning on the machine. They call this hashing. It basically allows the blade to chatter up and down on the lap while it's spinning, which gives it this coarse but repeated texture. I don't really use it for this purpose because I'm using a lead lap and I don't want to make lead dust go up into the air, so I stick with my razor blade. But sometimes it's handy to have this around if I want to cut some wax off or scrape something or clean something out of a crack in the table. It's handy just to have a little blade sitting around. So let's move over to the drawers, one of my favorite features of the bench. Inside the right drawer, I've got lots and lots of rough. Aquamarines, morganite, garnets, sapphires, opals, chrysoberyls, red garnets, spinels, heliodor, golden tourmaline, more heliodor, lots and lots and lots of rough. So this just gives me a lot of stuff to play with and practice with. I even have a bag of smoky quartz for doing some recutting practice. So these are badly cut windowed smoky quartz that I'll eventually recut into something better. So this is pretty much all the fun stuff that I'm going to cut over the next year. The left side drawer is not usually accessible because it's right behind my water drip. So usually what's in here is stuff that I don't need access to too much. Mostly backup stuff, an extra lighter, some more rough, some of the practice stones that I've done, an extra jar that I might need, a few little machine tools and screws and stuff that I've changed or I might want to change, and a bag of practice stones from a class project that I recently did up in the Jura. So this is kind of my miscellaneous drawer, but mostly it's meant for tools and accessories that I don't need to see all the time, but I still want to have access to. Above the drawers you can see that I have my two little slurry jars. So one of them is the 0 to 4, the other one's the 0 to 1. So this is where I keep my diamond slurry. When I make it inside of here, and then when I need to use it, I just open up one of these jars and I can apply it right onto the lap. So I keep them up here for easy access, and they're just sort of out of the way. Down below the drawer I've got my little wooden box with all my preformer cams, and I've also got this jar of natural diamond powder. So this is 1/4 to 1 micron diamond from EID in London. This is the exact same powder that Ken Harrington uses at Salamander Gems, so I picked this up the last time I was in London to give it a try. I haven't tried it yet, but eventually I'm going to, and if I like it better than what I'm already using, this will actually replace my 0 to 1 powder with the natural 1/4 to 1 diamond powder. Down under this other drawer I've got some other bags of stones. These are all stones that are already cut. I got them in Tucson this year so that I can use them for recutting practice throughout the year. I haven't done a ton of recutting on the jambpeg yet, so this is something that I definitely want to work on. Over here on the right side of the bench are a couple more important little items. This first one's called the tabler. This is what we use to transfer the stone or to help dop the stone the first time. When we're dopping for the first time, we've got our preform ready with a table, we put it into the hot wax, and then we put the stick into the tabler, and we can actually push the stone up against this flat plate, and it will make sure that the table is perfectly perpendicular to our dop, which is really important. Then when we're transferring the stone, we're going to take it out of the wax, completely clean it, redo the wax, flip the stone upside down, like how it is here, and then we can use these two little lines to visually line up the girdle line on the crown to make sure that that girdle line's perfectly parallel on the left and right side with this line. If it looks like our girdle's tilted down to the left or down to the right, it means that the stone is crooked in the wax and we need to adjust it. Then we can turn the stone around and look at it from every side and just make sure the girdle looks consistently level all the way around. This makes it really, really easy for us to do a perfect wax transfer without any other special kind of tools. Now this tool back here is for doing girdles. So you'll notice that there's a magnet on the bottom. This magnet attaches right onto the girdle plate so that it doesn't fall off. And then when you want to spin a round shape, you just put your stick into the device like this, and you can just spin it around while it's touching the lap. And as you go, you can lower it down a little bit, and it'll eventually make a perfectly round stone, and you don't even need the cam preformer. So that's the full walkthrough of my faceting bench, a blend of old world craftsmanship and modern precision designed to be beautiful, functional, and inspiring to me while I'm cutting. Thank you so much to all my Patreon supporters for helping support this channel so that I can make these kind of deep dive videos, and thank you to all the viewers for coming back time and time again, watching the videos, commenting, liking, and definitely sharing with your friends, right? This has been Justin K. Prim with the Gem Cutter's Craft, and I'll see you right back here next time.